As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study Exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues. Good evening, friends of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Our students, we want to acknowledge your presence in our midst. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by greeting you Happy New Month. We are in the 11th month of the year 2022, and it is my pleasure to come once again to give you another educative session, a topical issue with a facilitator that is vast in the topic that we're bringing across to you today. Let me notify you that today is Tuesday, the first day of the month of November 2022, and I've come with a topic called leadership and the accounting profession. And it is my pleasure to guest on this episode today, Dr. Daniel Monet, FCA. He is the head result consulting, a global leadership development firm based in Toronto, Canada, with associate consultant on every continent. He is an adjunct professor in the executive education arm of Smith School of Business, Queen University, Canada. He's also holds similar adjunct professorship role in 2 business schools in Africa and in Asia. He has combined academic rigor with practical experience during the 30 years plus corporate career. He had various senior leadership roles in diverse B2B, that's back-to-back, and B2C company. As a seasoned global executive, he has championed hands-on and transformational leadership in Fortune 500, S&P 100 companies. He established and managed new businesses across over 200 countries and territory. He earned his doctorate of business administration degree from University of Manchester, UK. His 5 years doctorate research is on organizational leadership. He's a member, a fellow of the Chartered Professional Accountant of Canada, that's FCPA and FCMA, a U.S. Certified Public Accountant, CPA, and he's a member of our Noble Institute, the Chartered Institute of Accountants of Nigeria, FCA. He is an author of The Pragmatic Optimist, 6 proven strategy for leading during a crisis, which is number 1 on Amazon Canada hot new release. A member of the board of directors of American Express, Bank of Canada, and chair of the board conduct review committee. He resides in Toronto and travels globally for speaking. But today, he's not traveling. He's connecting with us virtually all the way from Toronto. In no distance time, I'll be bringing to you our guest for today. Like I used to tell you, this ICAN on air, it's globally connected. And today, we are having someone talking to us from diaspora. And I can tell you, someone who wrote a book who at #1 on Amazon in Canada of new release. Stay tuned. Let me go on a very short break. I will be bringing in our guest. Then you have a scintillating time with him on a very good note to start the month of November. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Welcome back, and it is my pleasure to welcome to ICAN on Air our guest for today, Dr. Daniel Monet, FCA. Good evening and welcome on ICAN on Air.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Great to be here, and thanks for the wonderful intro.
Oh, I just have to make it that way because our listeners are always ready, prepared to add value to their knowledge base. We are discussing leadership and accounting profession. And let me start this way, Dr. Monet. The word leadership sounds very simple and ordinary. We use it at times arbitrarily, but it encapsulates and connotes so many things. As a leadership coach, our global audience will be glad to learn and share from your wealth of knowledge and experience. To this extent, I want to know the definition of leadership. Which one do you subscribe to? And who qualifies to be called a leader?
Loaded question. So, in terms of naming conventions, generally speaking, whether an individual, whether a corporation, whether a product, generally there are two schools of thought when it comes to naming. The first is that a name is nothing but a label or an identifier, while the second sees a name as the definition of the essence of the person, if it's a person, or the fundamental or the substance of a thing. So there is the label identifier and the true essence of a thing. When it comes to leadership, there is a lot of labels for leaders without the substance and the fundamentals and the foundation of what leadership truly is. And the reality in the definition, when you talk about the definition must go beyond the label and must touch on the essence and the fundamental and the substance of that term or the person bearing that term. In literature, there are over 650 definitions of leadership. I've gone through over 400 of them and studied them, and therefore I can make it 651. Okay, so I'm going to give you my own definition, and it's based on Newton's law of motion. So my definition is that every entity will continue in a state of stagnation or uniform growth on a straight line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces exerted on it. The principal force is leadership. Leadership is what causes an entity to change its state and change its trajectory. And that entity can be an individual, it can be a family, it can be a social group, it could be just an interaction amongst people, it can be an interaction among a large group of people in a team or an organization or a country. It does not matter. Leadership is what changes that state and transforms it. So in other words, leaders cause things to happen. Leadership is the process where things are made to happen. Usually things that are not yet seen by most people. Leaders see it and then come back and begin to align resources to make it happen. And that's why a Gallup study found that about 70% of a team's success is driven by its leadership. Don't get me wrong, not that the leaders do 70% of the work or that they produce 70% of the output, but what they do is what generates that result through other people. Okay, so that's the definition of leadership. And if I can just bring in definitions by others, John Quincy Adams says that if your actions cause others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader. In other words, leadership is always about other people. Leadership also is determined by who you are. Your personality and your character will go a long way to determine the kind of leader you will become. So if you are quiet and you are reserved and you don't engage, as a leader, you'll be seen as standoffish and aloof and maybe even arrogant. Okay, but you're not that. You just like keeping to yourself. And that was what Michael Dell found out in a hard way. When, Dell Computers, he had to bring in a chief operating officer who was more engaging, because Michael Dell is an introvert by nature and will keep to himself. And that was hurting the organization. So who you are determines how you lead. Also, how you feel, your emotions determine your leadership as well. How you feel determines how you lead. And then lastly, how leadership is also assessed differently. Different from what? Different from technical skills. For many years, ICAN was organized around the technical skills of accounting. Now it's beginning to break into a broader form of being a business driver and a business growth engine. But for a long time, it was for the technical role of accounting. And if you do, if you write ICAN exam, you wouldn't know who your examiner was. And you don't need to know who your examiner will be. I said very well the first time I came across an ICAN examiner. I was like, wow, he doesn't have two heads. Okay. Right? Because it's rare, the people that will be assessing that kind of high level examination. But here is the thing. To assess technical skills, the assessor does not need to know you. The assessor does not need to have met you. And that's because technical skills are highly defined. And from soup to nuts, they are boxed up. And an assessor can go in there and assess, and another assessor will mark the same thing, and they will fall in the same range, if not exact. But leaders are assessed by the people closest to them. So if you're married, your spouse will be one of the greatest assessors of the kind of leader that you are. Your child will be the kind of assessor to the kind of leader that you are, because how you lead at home is how you lead in the office. They know there's nothing like putting on the leadership hat when you go into the office. No. If you're an oppressor at home, you will oppress to oppress in the office. Therefore, the assessment is also up close and personal. And so leadership has to come from different angles. And that's why I try to, not to give you one definition, but to try and come at it at different angles. Finally, hope is very important for leadership, because like I said, a leader sees what others do not see, but has to convince them to go in the way that they may not want to go. So the leader, like Napoleon Bonaparte said, leaders are dealers in hope. And he knows that you can conscript people into an army, but you cannot conscript them to fight. The willingness to fight must come from the individual. The Iraqi army had all the equipment, but they turned their backs against a ragtag group that was more determined. They lacked the willingness to fight. The ragtag group didn't have any equipment or any weapons, but they were driven. Leadership is based on how driven you are as a person and how you're able to create hope for other people to latch on.
Dr. Monet, it's a very wonderful way to start the show on the first day of the 11th month, talking about leadership. In fact, while you are just doing it, I've already have about 3 pages of my paper, penciling down things, and I love that definition. But you see, the definition creates more confusion to me with this question. Some of us have background of certain things that bothers our mind, and with the definitions you've given, I want to take this word that most of us are used to say the argument in town that states that leadership are born or made. What's your position about it?
So if leaders are born, then there are over 8 billion leaders on Earth, because we are all born leaders. The capability, the requirements for leadership, vision, hope, being able to see what others do not see, being able to come back and persuade others and engage with other people, the human-to-human connection, and being able to have a sense of purpose and drive, all of that is embedded in the individual. All of that is embedded in the individual. Now, whether we're able to recognize it or not, that's a different ball game. So by the time I'm meeting people in my consulting work, they're already 20, 25 years, some 10, years in leadership. And therefore, they are already hard-coded. Before they even got into the workplace, their idea of leadership is already formed. Nobody, so here's the point. Nobody comes into the learning of leadership empty. You can go into an engineering class not understanding anything about thermodynamics, and at the end of that session, you are supposed to know the laws of aerodynamics and the fluidity and all of that. You're supposed to recognize that. But nobody comes in empty-handed. That's because leadership is modeled from the moment you begin to have your cognition as a human being. That's when, I'll give you an example, Alicia. So that's why you look around as a baby. Nobody, you can't even converse yet, but you look around and you go, why is everybody standing up and walking? And it looks like I'm the only one lying here. Okay, let me do something about it. And then they turn around and then they begin to struggle to, you don't train a child to walk. They themselves look around, and the first thing you do to develop a strategy, which is the work of a leader to see the future, is you do an environmental scan. You have to look around before you can define your strategy. And that's what that child was doing before developing a strategy for walking. They look around and they go, oh, looks like I'm the only different person in this room. And they begin to do something about it. And even when they fail, they keep going. Research says that a child that is learning to walk will fall about 7 times in an hour. But they do not stop. Can you imagine failing that many times in business? So we all have that innate trait, leadership trait, that we need to be successful. But for us to be truly successful, you now need to hone that skill and develop it as a separate skill. And then you become successful, because leadership is multidisciplinary. So to summarize and answer your question, leaders are born and then they are made.
Beautiful way to end that word. So the confusion in the heart of many, like myself, has been cleared now. Leaders are born and later made. That's a perfect way to have it. And to all our viewers who are connected globally, from the west in Nigeria to the east to the south, to the north, all the way from Gombe, Maiduguri, those from diaspora, you can start trailing in your question so that we can do justice to it. One thing I have seen is Dr. Munei has a deep background in science. So we'll be having the scientific application to leadership, which is always accurate. I'm already having those questions coming in before I go to my question on the other side. Dr. Abel is saying all the way from Abuja, is asking, what is the place of upbringing or socialization process in leadership?
It is central. It is critical. Leadership is a concept that we learn from others. We learn it from others first, even before we become aware of it, because what you learn from others determine and influences how you view life, your view of life. So your life's view is a combination of your environment, it's a combination of your engagement, it's a combination of the things you have been through, your life processes. So socialization is critical in understanding leadership. And that's why concepts like the power distance index is measured, because the power distance index is looking at how people who do not have power readily accept and defer to leaders who have power. So in the West, for example, generally the index is a low number. It's between 15 and 20. In Africa, it's between 75 and 80. In China, the Middle East, about 75 to 80, 85. And Indonesia has the highest in the world at 110, I believe. But I can tell you this, haven't said that, that's what the science says, that's what the research says, haven't said that, haven't worked in several countries, haven't been physically into 100 countries to build businesses over several years. I can tell you this, there is nothing like a national number. It varies by individual. It varies by individual. So if you grew up believing, maybe you learned it socially, maybe it was mirrored to you by your parents or whatever, but you believe that as a leader, it's either your way or the highway. You will come against contrary views and see them as enemy, and you will try to crush them. instead of welcoming them and seeing them as alternative views for which you as a leader should incorporate. Because leadership has to do not just with analysis, but with synthesis. Analysis is taking something apart. Synthesis is bringing them together. The work of a leader is the synthesis of different views and the diversity of thoughts, not having only one view of life. So to answer your question, socialization actually matters. And for you to actually progress, you would need to do it within a social context anyway. So it's all within the social context. Absolutely.
Very beautiful. And I want to believe that Dr. Hussein has gotten clarity to that. I still have another question from A, and I think I can sync that with the question that was actually prompted from me. You know, while you're giving your intro, you spoke about the initial level at which ICAN members get the technical know-how, but now we're talking about the business activity of it. And my question is, you're going to talk to us about the intersection of accounting and leadership. And I can link that to what Dr. Hussein is asking, that how are you able, now when you explain that to us, you should be able to give us a practical explanation how you're able to make the transition from being a technical accountant, debit and credit, to a great global leader on leadership that you are today.
Okay, good question. I love this question. This is something that I've always thought about, especially as when I began my journey to leadership development, which began in 1998. Initially, I had my background in banking, and I thought I was going to be a bank CEO. But it was in 1998 that I realized really what I was made for, what I was put on earth for, and that is to help leaders become better versions of themselves. So the journey began in 1998, and in that journey, I realized every decision that I took from then was driven by what I'm doing now. So part of that decision was this. I thought, I've always been on the front office side of things. That is, I ran a P&L. I had revenue target. I had P&L target. I had bottom line target. I was on the growth side of business, and I knew that leaders on the growth side of business, they thought differently. Okay, they were very strategic. They were comfortable taking risks. They were only looking for trade-offs when they took risks, but they were always comfortable taking risks. They were highly engaging individuals, and on and on and on. And then when I look at leaders in the back office, they behave differently. They were looking more to minimize risks. They were looking not to make losses. They were looking at not to do certain things, not finding ways to do it. And on it. So I thought, you know what? Since I'm going to be a leadership expert for everybody, I want to see the inside of the back office. So I pivoted into the back office, became an SAP implementation consultant, and was rolling that out in North America, massive businesses, and then moved into finance and rose to become a chief financial officer. But I said all that to say this: I saw the inside of the back office and then crossed over again back to the front office. Yes, to be an EVP, rose to be an EVP running a P&L, initially creating the business in a single country, then expanding it to 47 countries within 3 years, and then creating a new global business that expanded into over 210 countries like you talked about. So what I'm saying is this: there is hardly any other function within an organization that is as central to understanding what that business is all about than the finance and accounting function. Here's how I put it: every transaction that matters, and any business transaction at all, flows through, is captured turned into a financial estimate or
Expert,
figure,
yeah.
and it flows through finance and accounting. So finance and accounting sits in the core of the organization, and you can see what is going on. 360 view. But what I find is that very few accounting professionals move into management roles beyond finance and move into leadership roles, across the organization. Such that when I made that move, so from the CFO into the business, and that was in 2010, I got a call from the global CFO of the organization. And she said, Daniel, you're doing something that is uncommon. You are flying our flag on the business side. She said, don't let us down. But after that, several others now followed and had begun to mentor others, because you find that people from different functions, from marketing, from legal, from sales, from treasury, they find it so easy to move into leadership roles, but finance professionals who actually sit in the center and have a better view of the organizations, they hesitate. They hesitate and get focused on the numbers, thinking that is enough. Today, I want to encourage as many of your listeners as possible to tell you that if you're in finance and accounting, you have the opportunity to have as much knowledge as the CEO of the organization, and you have the opportunity to actually think like the CEO of the organization. But the market is shifting. And the market is not waiting for us to catch it. What do I mean, Sheson? I saw very recently, the list of the top 100 most valuable brands in the world. And I decided to take out the top 5 of them. So I looked at the top 5 of them: Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Walmart. Sheson, there's something that was common amongst all of them. None of their CFOs is a chartered accountant. None. Okay, they have experience, different form of experiences. Some are engineering, chemistry, physics, Spanish. They'll come from different walks of life, but all of them have been in growth businesses. They've run growth organizations. And so you'll be wondering, but they're signing off on financial statements that the SEC, if it's a US company, requires. Yeah, they will now hire the chartered accountant to do that work for them, to crunch the numbers, while the leaders are not. But these 5 companies are not alone. I can go on. MasterCard, their CFO is not a chartered accountant. Visa is not a chartered accountant. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, IBM, Twitter, Tesla, Occidental Petroleum, ExxonMobil, Facebook, Goldman Sachs. None of them. I've passed through the exams that you had to pass through to become a chartered accountant, but they control and they lead the chartered accountant. And that reminds me of a saying of a leadership expert. He said this. He said, the man that knows what will always have a job, but the one that knows why will always be his boss. Leadership is about the why, not the what. Okay? The what is essential. Don't get me wrong. You have the what is critical, but the why is supreme. And that's how to make that transition. Number one, so I'll summarize with this. I believe every professional has 3 levels of competencies. Unfortunately, all of our focus and attention and formal education, virtually everybody focuses on the lowest level of competency. And that's what I call the technical competency. On top of that is managerial competency. And then at the pinnacle is the leadership competency. Like I said, technical is the what, management is the how, leadership is the why. Technical focuses on the product. So So if I pick this iPhone, you know it's an Apple product. So when you think of Apple, you will think of their products. That is the what. That's fine. And there are people who are paid to develop the what. That is the essence of what you're exchanging. Okay. Your what as a professional is what you're doing in the organization. So if you're in HR, so that's human resources. If it's marketing, your what is the marketing, deliverables that you have
Deliverable,
to
yeah.
wearing, yes, or whatever. That is your what. Your how begins to go into the area of planning, of organizing, of controlling, of coordinating, of executing strategy. That is of maximizing performance, of reporting on performance. That is management. That cuts across the what, and it organizes the what, and it makes it more productive,
More productive.
efficient. Yes. Okay. And that has to do with processes. So the what is the product, the how is the processes,
Process.
the leadership is the why. And there's only one entity in your organization that asks why. You know what that entity is? The human in your organization. That's the only person that wants to know why. Outside of the organization is the customers that want to see what is the why. Why do you even exist as an organization? Your stakeholders, they want to know why. Your shareholders, what is driving you as an organization? That is the purpose. So purpose for leadership, purpose and people, the planning and the performance and the processes for management, and then the product.
Management.
What are you exchanging? Yes. So they sit on each other.
For the technical team.
Yes. So it's not a matter of leadership is better than management or management. No. They are all interrelated and they are needed.
Beautiful submission. Sincerely speaking, I won't mind to be in one of your classes. If you have to take me for 7 hours, I'm sure I won't get off my seat, because you have actually been taking us deep. And let me go straight to this question. Possibly it will address Olusoji's question that is being placed on the screen. With your vast knowledge that we are learning today in leadership, there's what we call leadership gap. We just experienced that scenario not too long in our country, Nigeria. Just last week, the CBN governor, announces the plan to redesign our Nigerian currency, and less than 48 hours, the Honorable Minister of Finance said our ministry was not consulted or carried along. As a leadership coach, what is your view about surrounding that incident? Because these are people we refer to as leaders in our country.
So what is the leadership gap? What do you mean by leadership gap? I understand the scenario, but please clarify what you mean by the leadership gap.
Well, the leadership gap area I'm saying is like a drama, somebody trying to claim superiority over the other and feel that I'm more, of high importance than the other. So I need to be consulted rather than possibly, from your explanation that we've been gathering, having a synergy.
Got it. So one of the distinguishing factors and quality of a leader is the ability to move beyond your tribe and move across other tribes. And I'm not using the tribe in a sense of national tribes and all that. I'm talking of just a group of similar people. So a tribe can be a department, a team. So the finance organization, for example, is a tribe in the organization. And they can look at HR as a different tribe because they have a different training, they have a different approach, they have a different view of things, and marketing and sales and all of that, technology. So those are different tribes in the organization. One of the landmark studies that I've seen, it says that the greatest weight on the performance of most organizations is the existence of silos between the tribes. I'll tell you this. A friend and a professional colleague who is also a client of mine shared this experience with me. She's a senior executive in an engineering firm. And she said, Daniel, I've just been recognized by the CEO. I've just been given the CEO award. She said, but having listened to what you just said now, she said, I'm beginning to understand why I got the award. I said, why? She said, because that is the first time in the company's history when somebody from the mechanical engineering department, which is where she belonged, will walk across to civil engineering and material engineering and chemical engineering, because it's a full service engineering firm, and create a solution that moved the needle and provided comfort and purpose for the client. And that was the first time in the 75-year history of the company that somebody will walk across from one tribe to another tribe for cooperation. It's amazing. Leadership has no. Okay, so let me put it this way. This is something that a coach of mine and a mentor of mine taught me. He says this. He says leadership. He says the team that you are on is more important than the team that you lead. The team that you are on is more important than the team that you lead. If I look at the scenario you gave, definitely the CBN knew what was going on, but the CBN governor belongs to a team. Did he engage that team at that level with the level of clarity that his own team had about it? That's the question. So what we find is that generally speaking, we look out for the team that we lead. We look out for our own tribe to the disadvantage of the other tribes. And that in science leads to suboptimal decision making. When you make a decision based on your own tribe primarily, and you ignore the connections and the information, the sharing of information, the managing of the spillover, what you described, the changing of a currency, that is a momentous action. And definitely the key players have to be carried along, not just one central person who has all the powers, because leadership is not about power. No, it's about persuasion. You're able to persuade, to move to people that do not have power over you, but you need their own power to be successful. You have to be able to co-opt it. You need to step outside of your tribe into the others and engage them. Cross-functional leadership is critical. And that's one of the factors that keep accountants back usually from going forward.
Beautiful submission. And I want to believe people are taking different perspective now, having a deeper understanding on the drama that has just happened. Let me move, because the time I'm looking at is not just our friend. From your CV, I read you served for 6 years on IFAC Professional Accountants in Business, that is PAIB committee, where you helped to shape the framework of future fit accountant. Can you give us a view of some of the happenings for this period and into the future?
Absolutely. So yeah, so those 6 years were exciting for me when I served on the professional accountants for in business committee, an advisory group for IFAC, for the IFAC board itself. So we were a large group of about 20 plus individuals from all over the world, and we come together with the view of making the accounting profession better and to make it more relevant for the future. Very, very sound, intelligent, very experienced people, and part of the final submission that IFAC has now taken forward and published talks about the 7 roles of the future fit accountant. But I'll just talk about 3 of them. The accountant as a co-pilot, the accountant as a navigator, and the accountant as a storyteller. A good friend of mine who participated in the research behind my book is an instructor in a university in London on aviation, but he's also a pilot, a Boeing 737 pilot with Singapore Airlines. When we're discussing, he said, Daniel, there's actually not much difference between the qualities of a pilot and a co-pilot. A good co-pilot's qualities overlap with the qualities of a pilot. Yes. So that's why I said that an accountant who really understands the importance of the role that they have should be thinking like the CEO of the organization. If you cannot be like the pilot, you will actually make for a miserable co-pilot. Okay, so second thing is the navigator. You have to be able to navigate, and this navigation and being a navigator all centers around the execution of a strategy. And for me, I've seen strategies being developed in so many forms. I've seen people who go to develop a strategy on how to overcome a market, and then we go, okay, after all the work is done, we hang out. And from discussions, we find out that they're actually using the product of the competitor. They don't even use our company's product, whereas they spend time talking about the strategy on growth. You cannot live that way, because leadership has to be. If you're not true to yourself, you cannot navigate the path that you need to be successful as a leader. And that's because no strategy remains intact on the first contact with the market. You can develop your strategy all you want. The moment you begin to execute it, it begins to change form. And the question is, are you able to stay ahead of it? Finally, leadership, not just as a co-pilot or as a navigator, but a storyteller. The accountant needs to be the storyteller, not the person who is like, talking to him is like watching paint dry. You shouldn't be a boring person, for crying out loud. I've seen where I've been engaging with people and I finished a presentation when I was CFO, and people walk up to me and they go, "Oh, you don't talk like one of us." And I'll be like, "What do you mean one of us?" And I find out that the person is a CFO from another company. And I'm thinking, do you mean that accountants are supposed to be boring? No, they're not supposed to be. Because as a storyteller, you're supposed to incorporate the three parts of stories: the ethos, the pathos, and the logos. The accountants usually focus on the logos, which is the hard numbers, the analysis, the facts, the statistics. That is critical, but it is nothing without the ethos, the credibility behind it, without the pathos, the passion, the emotion behind it, weaving it all together to form a story. That is what will make you stand out, and you'll begin to be seen as a leader. And once the organization recognizes that, trust me, you'll be pulled out of the finance department so fast, because it will say that, hey, this guy understands the core of our business. And now he or she can see across the tribes and can engage with them and can speak in their language and can tell stories, because stories touches the heart of the human. It tugs at our emotions. It's the most fundamental of all our activities that has remained unchanged for millennials. So the people want the story. Give them the story behind the numbers. It's not just the numbers. There's a story behind it. So those are the three things that I'll talk about.
Sincerely speaking, Dr. Monet, I can allow you to keep talking and talking, but I will not round up this session because time is really fast moving. And I think this is like spending several hours. Let's talk about your recent published book that it's #1 hot new release on Amazon. You titled it Pragmatic Optimist, 6 proven strategy for leading during crisis. What motivates you to write the book? Maybe before I allow you to answer that question, sure. Let me lead our members to say, visit amazon.com/global. You just have to pick up that book, because even part of his contribution to the 7 roles for the future fitted, it's really mind-blowing, not to talk of it. But Dr. Monet, give us an insight to what motivates you in writing the book.
Right. So it was 2014. And that was a year that I said, okay, no more postponing. I would never have enough time to do this. I want to do it now. And what am I talking about? Going for my doctorate degree. I was working 12, 15-hour shifts a day. I was on over 95 flights a year, very busy. But I realized that that was the only last piece of what I was building to do what I'm doing now. And so I enrolled for my doctorate. And they were like, hey, you want to do leadership? That's so broad. You need to narrow it down. And I said, okay, I need a week to think about the area that I need to focus on. And I went through and I kept thinking, what can I focus on? And Sheson, the answer came about 3 hours before the end of the deadline. I'm sure a few people will understand what I mean by that. And then finally, I was like, hang on, there's only one area of leadership where in all of my years of experience, leading, and by this time I was talking 16 years into my journey of studying leadership, of seeing leadership from the inside. Okay, so 16 years of doing that from 1998, right? There's only one area of leadership where I've seen leaders being the most vulnerable. They are usually the weakest at this point. And that is when leaders make the most grave mistakes ever that they make. What is that period? When the organization is facing a crisis. When a leader is facing adversity, usually it throws them off course. Okay, so that was the first thing that caught my attention. Crisis leadership. And then secondly, by this time, 14 years, I'd spoken on various platforms on leadership around the world, in Singapore, in Europe, in North America. I've spoken on the areas of leadership, but everybody wanted to talk about strategic leadership, transformational leadership. How do you motivate my team? Blah, blah, blah. Nobody ever invited me to speak about how to lead in a time of crisis. And then thirdly, so I realized that whenever I spoke about it, it was because I was given a blank check. Hey, Daniel, come speak to us, and you can pick any topic. And then I would pick that. And then when I picked that, when I was developing my material, I found out that there was hardly any material in there. But as Toni Morrison said, she said, if there is a book you really want to read, but it has not been written, then you must write it. And that's actually the first quote in my dissertation, in my thesis. And that was how I began that journey. But not just that, the reason I wrote the book itself was that by the time I published my dissertation and I defended it, what was shared by the leaders that I interviewed were so central and so core and so sensitive that the school agreed with me that the dissertation be embargoed not for 3 years, not for 7 years, but forever. So my dissertation of 5 years that I spent 5 years writing would never be seen. So I thought, you know what? I have to extract the principles from that dissertation and turn it into a book. That was what I did. And to summarize and to round up, the most research book that I have ever read, and I have in my library maybe close to 300 to 400 books. There's only one that is the most research that stands above them all. And that is Jim Collins' Good to Great. You might have heard of it, Good to Great. It has 300 references. The book, the leadership book, has 300 references. This book, The Pragmatic Optimist, my book, has 410 references. It is the most researched book that I have come across in terms of how to lead, and not an academic book, but a practical management leadership book is the most researched book.
Beautiful. And I'm stating it again that our viewers, you'll be doing yourself great justice by looking to amazon.com/global for you to pick up a copy of that book on Amazon for transformation. Sincerely speaking, Dr. Munay, I've always been challenging time when I have good guests like this on the program, but the time will always tell me that Sheson is fixed. We need to move on. Let me round up on this note. Sir, you'll permit me if I call you Prof. Not just a doctor, because you've actually increased our knowledge base. In just 1 minute, ICAN is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of their members, accounting profession, and Nigerian business environment. In a general term, what would be your advice or suggestion to our institutes, the member, regarding leadership and accounting profession in Nigeria?
Right. So it's very simple. It is to recognize that the world is in need of leaders. The world is looking for leaders. Actually, scratch that. The world is desperate for authentic leadership. But in its absence, because there can never be a vacuum, there are a lot of mediocres that are making it to the positions of leadership. And that's because the mediocres outnumber the authentic leaders by a huge margin. ICAN and its members can begin to commit to be churning out the authentic leaders that the world needs. And the world will recognize them. And in recognizing them, they see that they come in highly skilled, highly capable, and then they add that bit of leadership to it, which is the ability to be able to see what others do not see, but coming back to engage with them, giving them a sense of purpose, and leading them towards that journey. That is what true leadership is. It's not about you. Leadership is about everybody else. Thank you.
That is a very great way and good way to bring our submission to close this evening. And to all our viewers, sincerely, I've been guessing Prof. Because if I call him a doctor, I'm underestimating that quality that is embedded in it. Daniel Monet, FCA, who have been doing justice to leadership and accounting profession. We've had a lot that we have learned, and the parting shot was just great. ICAN should start considering chunking out leaders because we are needed. We are co-pilots who understand navigation. We should apply the storytelling. How I wish I can have the 7 rows, but those 3 that you've given is a take home for all our viewers. Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel Molnay, for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air today. Our pleasure. And we want to believe when next we put a call through out of your tight schedule, you will come in again to educate our members, most especially this area of leadership, based on your advice that the Institute need to roll out, leaders from here. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. As I round off, let me just appreciate all our global viewers who has one way or the other benefited from the experience and the knowledge base of our guests today. Thank you very much for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air. But before I go, I have a few announcements that I want to pass across to you. That the fellowship conferment portal has been opened, and if you are due, you know the criteria: 5 years for those in practice and 10 years for those not in practice. The portal is open. You can go ahead and start doing your registration. And also, the World Accountant Congress is coming up in India from November 18th to 21st. You all know the strategic role we play with IFAC. Even our guest today has been a member of the committee representing your institute. So we encourage you to chunk in numbers to Mumbai, India, to be part of the World Congress of Accountants coming up November 18 to 21. It's been a wonderful time this evening listening to our guest on leadership, and a lot have been learned. I want to believe that you will stay tuned again on Thursday, where we'll bring your way another scintillating facilitator, another speaker that will do justice to our topic for today. Until then, stay tuned and continue to stay safe. I remain your host, Olusegun Okwade, FCA. Bye for now.